Welcome, everyone, to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to take a look at the daily balancing functions of the AIM software. The idea here is that the balancing functions can be used as an end-of-day procedure to see what you will be depositing in the bank. It's a way to keep track of those deposits. Maybe you're going to split them between several different checking accounts or a savings account or an in-house safe. But that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. We'll also take a look at some of the reports that kind of stem off of that. And this will ultimately stand into Friday's session, which we'll be talking about with bank reconciliation. Now, if you've never attended one of these live webinars before, if you've only been checking out recordings, or if this is your time, first of all, welcome to the TriTech family. Now, we are using GoToWebinar. For doing this broadcast. You'll have to excuse my frog that I have in my throat. Excuse me. But we're using GoToWebinar. So if at any point you have any questions on today's content, there is a questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to type any questions that you have into there. I will see those questions pop up on my screen as we go along, and I will do my best to answer those as we progress through the webinar. So that being said, if the webinar control panel is taking up too much room on your screen, if you're joining me on a smaller laptop or a desktop that has a smaller monitor, there's going to be a little button that lets you shrink it down. It's going to look like a little orange button with a white arrow on it, and that will take it off to the side of the screen, get it out of the way, so that you can see the full experience of my desktop. So, without further ado, let's talk about what daily balancing is. In your modules and daily posting menu, you have a program called Daily Deposit. Right here by default on your menu breakdown. Now, what Daily Deposit does is it takes a snapshot of your entire store and by location. You'll see there's a little location drop down here. And over on the left, it shows you all of your workstations. It also breaks down all the different ways in which you take payment. And the idea here is that as you transact sales, layaways, orders, repairs, what have you, and you accrue payments throughout the day, those payments will show up in here on this clearing side of all those different payment methods: cash, check, Visa, MasterCard, etc. And the idea with that is that at the end of the day, or whenever you close out your drawers, you can see what's in there, verify that the amounts are correct, and ultimately you can record that these are going to be deposited into your checking account. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this screen, let's talk a little bit about the rest of it. So there's a few things that you might find really handy as far as these settings are concerned. First of all, where are all of these accounts coming from? If we go ahead and jump back to the main menu and go into maintenance and into ledger, you're going to see your system categories. Now, the idea of system categories is that these are a number of hard-coded categories that AIM reflects on and references when certain things happen. You can see there's options in here for when you receive or change inventory, or you process a trade-in, or different things like that. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at what are called the daily deposit accounts. Now, in version 12, these are all going to be consolidated into one system category, 1889 by default. If you are joining me and you're still on version 11 or older, you'll still find this daily deposit setup in the system categories. However, there is a maximum number of 6 references per system category. So you'll notice if you are joining us and you're browsing your own system categories that you'll have an 1890, an 1891, an 1892, etc., which gives you basically 6 extra daily deposit accounts per system category. In version 12, like we see here, you can see how it's showing us the first 6 references, but down below you can see I have many more than 6 there. Now these work in pairs. Basically, the first reference is the depositing account, and the second reference is the clearing account. So you can see how, for example, and it might be a little hard to see if again you have a smaller screen, but reference 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, these are all referencing my checking account. This is where the money's going to go at the end of the day. References 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., the even numbered references are the clearing accounts where the money is coming from. Now, these are all using default ledger accounts, such as 109-1 check clearing, 109-2, or excuse me, 109-1 cash clearing, 109-2 check clearing, etc., etc. Basically, these are being hit when certain payment categories are being used at point of sale. So for example, when I take a cash payment, that is going to have that cash amount posted to 109-1. Then by extension, when I do a deposit, either at the end of the day or whenever I'm doing that, that wants to come out of 109-1 and go into 108-1. So that's kind of the idea of this. If you are customizing your own payment categories and things like that, you may find that you will need to add them to this list. So for example, if I come into payment categories and I create, let's say, a new category, let's just call it, say, for example, PayPal, and I set that up as a regular payment, I'll go ahead and hit save on that. And of course, it wants a ledger number. I don't have a ledger number for PayPal. So actually, let me just see about picking one just as an example. So let's pretend that my coupon clearing for reason is my PayPal clearing. Of course, you would go into your chart of accounts and you'd set that up. Now you'll notice when I hit save on this, it's going to come up and say, for this payment category to be available in point of sale, a button will need to be added to the tender menu. And additionally, and this is the key point for the purpose of this webinar, if the associated ledger account should be a part of the daily deposit, it will need to be added to the daily deposit account's system category. And that's what this is back here in system categories, that system category 1889. You would want to come in and you would want to add, in this case, the coupon clear, which we're pretending to be the PayPal clearing. You would want to add that in as a reference along with a corresponding deposit account. The way that you would do that is you would come in to system category 1889, and down at the bottom of this list, you'll notice that there's a little thing here that says click here to add a new row. When you click that, it's going to ask you what should be the ledger account of the next corresponding reference. I want to deposit my PayPal into my checking account, so I will go ahead and select checking account number 1, and I will go ahead and hit tab on that, and you'll see that that adds reference number 15 now to my 1889 system category. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another one, and this time I'm going to reference that 1097 coupon / PayPal clearing, and I'm going to go ahead and hit tab on that. So you'll see it's now added references 15 and 16. I'll go ahead and hit save, and if we look down, we'll see that we now have references 15 and 16 there. So that when we go back into modules and daily posting and daily deposit, you're going to notice that we now have a new line here for coupon clearing that wants to deposit into my checking account. Does that make sense? Let me know in the questions box if you have any extra questions on that. Now, as far as the normal basic functions of daily deposit, all you really have to do is go about your normal daily functions. We'll go into a point here, we'll just do a couple of quick sales. Let's say I do some RT14 sales, as you've seen me do time and time again here on these webinars, maybe a music stand, maybe a couple of pads, and I'm going to go ahead and tender that. Now, what I'm going to do for the purposes of today's webinar is I'm going to do a couple of split sales just to get some money in a couple of multiple accounts here. First of all, I will go ahead and I will hit the cash button, and I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm taking $15 in cash. And you'll see that gets added there as a $15 cash amount. I've got a remaining amount of $531, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that that was paid via coupon. Again, we're pretending coupon is my PayPal account. Let's go ahead and hit finalize on that. And then that will, of course, go ahead and do a printout for me. We're not going to worry about the purposes of the printout. Ron is asking a question that my 1889 is showing references 5 and 6 blank. Will this be a problem? Not at all, Ron. Basically, what that means is that you now have room in that system category to add that. I guess I should specify, if you are in version 11 or older, and you can only add up to 6 references, and they do need to be in pairs like we discussed. So if you see all 6 filled, you would just want to move to the next daily deposit system category. If you see some empty spaces, that means that you have at least room to add extra references. So Ron, in your case, references 5 and 6 are blank. That means that you can add one extra payment method into your system category 1889, because remember, you need 2 for every one payment method. So hopefully that makes sense there, Ron. Thank you so much for the question. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do one more quick sale just to have some extra sales in here. Let's do a guitar. I will go ahead and override the sale on that because it thinks it is a short-term rental item, and I'm going to go ahead and sell it anyway. I'm going to go ahead and tender that. And what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to say that this was paid via check. And that check was check number 1000. So it pays off the full balance of that. We'll finalize that. And again, we're not going to worry about the printout. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and take a look at the daily deposit. So here in the daily posting menu, we'll reopen daily deposit. And what we're going to see now is these balances showing up here. So we've got $15 in cash clearing. We've got $234.33 in check clearing. And we've got $531 coming up in coupon clearing. And again, for our purposes, we're pretending that is a PayPal clearing. Now, the idea with this is that you should have in your cash drawer whatever you start the day with as far as your starting cash plus $15, assuming no other activity to that drawer. What you have here is what you should pull out of the drawer in addition to your starting cash. Now, $15, of course, should be very easy to come up with. You just basically count it out. If we are talking about a larger sum, so let's say you start every day with $125 and you pull that aside and now you've got all this money left over, if you would like to more easily count that out rather than assuming that you counted correctly, you can right-click on this line and there will be an option to count the drawer. When you count the drawer, what it will do is it will come up with this little handy window. If you have set a specific starting balance for this particular workstation, that will show up here at the top, and it will be checkmarked as subtract the drawer amount from the total. Now, basically the idea with that, we'll talk about that in a second, but the idea with this is that you have basically all the denominations of standard US dollars, 150, 20, etc., all the way through the various coinage. And basically, as you count them out, you can click the add button for every dollar, or every bill, rather, I should say, of that denomination. In my example, I'm going to say that they gave me a 10 and a 5. So I click the add button each on that. That comes up with my $15. And if I hit OK on that, what it will have done, it's not directly obvious, but it will have overridden this deposit amount with the amount that I counted. Let me show you an example of maybe the amount being off. So I'm going to go ahead and recount the drawer. Let's give a hypothetical. Let's say they gave me a 10 and not 1 5, but 5 ones. So I say 110 and 1, 2, 3, 4, but oh shoot, I thought they handed me 5 ones, but they only handed me 4. And I didn't catch that at the time of the sale. So I'm going to leave it at that. I only counted $14 aside from my starting cash. I'm going to hit OK. And what you're going to see happens is it shows $14 now in this deposit amount column, and it's showing the difference up in the top right in an over and short field. That over and short field is linked to a specific ledger account in your system called cash over and short. It keeps a running balance of all of the times you've been either over or short in your daily deposits. So this is kind of the idea there. I can count that out, and if I'm off and I can't figure out why I'm off, I'm just going to assume, well, it is what it is, and I would go ahead and hit save. Before I hit save, though, I do want to talk about a couple of extra functions that you may find handy with this daily deposit. Now, in version 12, you will have the ability to click on this little arrow over here on the left-hand column. And what that will do is that will open up all of the sales activity, showing you the store location, the tax location, the reference number of the transaction, the date and time that transaction occurred, what source code that's coming from. SJ is short for sales journal in the system. The amount and the transaction type. So you can see it also confirms that this is a sales invoice from the sales journal source code. The idea with this is you can look at this, and if you maybe are off a few dollars here or there, you can go back and look at this, and you can see what exactly made up these balances in these amounts. So that's kind of one little handy thing here. The other thing I want to point out, and this is crucial, is you'll notice that when I counted out $14, it left the clearing amount as 15. And that's because as far as the system was concerned, it received $15 of cash clearing. We need to clear that out back to 0, basically to make this daily deposit work. So we're still going to clear out all $15 from the cash clearing account, and that is the purpose of this over and short. Because we're clearing out 15 but only depositing 14, we still need to accommodate and account for that discrepancy, in this case the over and short. Let me know if that makes sense. The other thing that you can do with this daily deposit program is, if you right click, and let's say that you are not fully depositing that amount into your checking account, you can either change the checking account or you can split the deposit if you're doing a split deposit between 2 or more accounts. So in the purposes of, let's say I don't want to deposit that into checking account 1, maybe I want to deposit that directly into my savings account. So I could say change checking account for the current record, and then from there I can select the appropriate ledger account that I want that to be deposited into. So let's say it's going into the savings account, and you see that that will change now. So the $14 is being deposited into my savings. Let's say I'm not actually depositing it, keeping it on hand. There is another ledger account in here by default called cash on hand, 101-1. I can select that. Maybe I am putting a certain amount in my safe and I'm depositing a certain amount into my checking account. That's the idea of the split deposit. I'm going to leave some of that 14 in the safe, and the rest I'm going to go ahead and put into my checking. Let's say I'm going to put $10 into my checking. I'm going to go ahead and select split deposit. I'm going to choose checking account number 1, and I'm going to go ahead and put in $10. And what you'll see happens is $4 gets left in cash on hand. The other $10, you'll see it added a second line here. You'll notice it's also splitting out the cash clearing clear amount, $5 here, $10 here, both coming from 109.1. So again, the total amount being cleared is still 15, but I'm depositing 4 into my cash on hand account and $10 into my checking account. So that's kind of the idea with that. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Mostly at this point, this is only beneficial if you are using the full Monty of AIM for your bookkeeping. Again, this kind of spans into what we'll be talking about on Friday with bank reconciliation. We will keep this this data intact between now and Friday so that we can see these coming up in a bank reconciliation on that day. So that's kind of the idea with this. Now, a couple of other things you might find handy. You'll notice that these all have check boxes next to them. This can be handy if, let's say, you don't want to clear certain ledger accounts, certain clearing accounts at the end of the day. Maybe, for example, your credit cards only batch every other day. I'm not sure if that is a thing or not, but if you wanted to not clear those, you could simply come in here and uncheck those options, and then they would keep their amounts retained in the clearing account. They would not be deposited into the deposit account until the next time you came in and left them checkmarked and ultimately hit save. So that's kind of another thing that you can do with this. The other thing that you'll notice up at the top is there is both a cutoff date and a posting date. If you, for whatever reason, let's say that you have a hypothetical of you do this accounting the next morning after the previous day's business, and let's say that you've had some transactions happen at first thing of the day, and you don't want those transactions to get mixed up in yesterday's deposit. You can change the cutoff date to be the previous date. So assuming I'm coming in Thursday morning to take care of Wednesday's transactions, I could change the cutoff date to be as of Wednesday, and the posting date would be as of Thursday. That way, I'm showing that as far as my ledger is concerned, it's being deposited into my bank as of Thursday, the posting date, but it's only using and showing transactions as of up to the 22nd, or Wednesday in my example. And then let me just flesh that out. So pretend that this is Thursday, and I would be posting everything on Thursday, but only up for the transactions on Wednesday. So that's kind of the idea with that. If you are managing a large store and you have several different workstations that have their own cash drawers, and you'd like to make sure that if they're coming into the daily deposit, they're only kind of seeing their amounts, there are a few things that you can set in the workstation levels. I'm going to jump over to that in just a moment. There are a couple of other questions here coming in. Charles is asking, is that a right click or a left click to access the options? Excellent question, Charles. In this and pretty much every other grid like this in AIM, these are all going to be right click options. So pretty much anytime you right click on a grid like this, you're going to probably find that you have some options that are special to this window, such as these clear values, changing the accounts, things like that. Pretty much everyone will have options for copy, exporting and printing these data, checking out those other kinds of things. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you so much, Charles, for the question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this. So we'll come back to that in a moment. But one thing I want to talk about now is how you can do some preliminary settings in your workstations. So let's go back to the main menu. We'll go into Maintenance, General, and Workstations. And for each workstation, you're going to have some settings available to you. First and foremost, in the POS tab, you can set a drawer start amount. So this is going to be beneficial for when you are doing that daily deposit. If you start every day with $125 in the drawer, you can put that in the drawer start amount. And when you save that, ultimately, when you are looking at your daily deposit, it will start negative $125 in the hole when you're doing that count drawer option, and you would count out up to $125 to get you basically to square zero, and everything you count on top of that is your daily activity that should match up with your clearing balance. The next thing, if we take a look at the miscellaneous tab, And if I remember correctly, it is miscellaneous 2. Yes. So down here in the deposit box of miscellaneous 2 on tab 4, you have what are called the deposit workstations. And the idea with this is these are the workstation numbers that you want to have both displayed and or selected when you are going into the deposit program, the daily deposit program. So if let's say that there are two computers that share a cash drawer, and you want them to show the balance of those two, but no other computers. For those two computers, let's say it's computer 1 and computer 2, you could come in here and you could put in their workstation numbers, and you would separate them with what's called a pipe. So 1, pipe 2. If you're not sure what a pipe is, let me see if I can pull up my keyboard. It's different on every keyboard. Let me just pull up my webcam so I can see what you're seeing. There we go. So on, let's see, where is it? That's the wrong side. Okay. So on the enter side, usually above the enter key, sometimes it's not, but there's going to be a backslash, and then the pipe key is usually, well, it's always above the backslash. Sometimes the backslash key is on a different spot of your keyboard, but that's kind of where you can expect to find that. Sometimes as well, that pipe key is a dashed vertical line, not a solid vertical line. So I figured I'd just mention that. Everyone always asks, well, what's a pipe? Well, that's a pipe. So basically when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and do that for both of these. So 1, pipe 2, save that. And then I would do the same thing basically on the other computer, the second workstation, 1, pipe 2, and 1, pipe 2. Then when I go back, exit this, and go back into my daily deposit program, what we're going to see is you'll notice that it only shows now and has selected computers 1 and 2 over on the left, whereas before it was basically showing me all of those. So it's kind of breaking down just the computers that should be depositing into that drawer. Now, regarding that start drawer amount, if I go in and I count the drawer, you'll notice that it's coming up and showing me negative $125. I've already saved my transaction from earlier, so you can see how these are all reverted to clear, to zero. Assuming that I now have $125, I can count out my 100, my 20, and my 5, and you can see how that brings me back to zero, so that when I hit OK, I'm coming out to my $0 value. And this can also technically happen if it comes out at the end of the day and your cash clearing is showing in the negative. That's certainly possible if you've had more returns for cash returns than you have had payments in cash. And if that's the case, when you do your count drawer, in theory, you would have less than your starting value. So let's say I did negative $20 in returns that day. If I counted out my 100 and my 5, but not my 20, you'll notice it's showing me negative 20 there. So when I hit OK, it's going to show a negative 20. And of course, that's also going to show in the over and short because I haven't had $20 in returns for the day. So that's kind of the concept of that. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, let me know if there's any questions on that. Some reports that build off of daily daily deposit. Let's go ahead and take a look when we are in the reports menu. And if we go to the general ledger reports menu, you're going to find that there's what's called a daily balance report. The daily balance report has 3 options: current deposits, past deposits, and past deposits by date. I've got 2 past deposits here, one that I did just prior to the webinar starting to reset everything to 0, and then the one that I just did about 5 minutes ago. The idea of this report is when you run the current deposit, this is going to show you your undeposited accrued balances of those accounts, cash, check, Visa, MasterCard, etc., for whatever date range you run this for. If I go ahead and do this right now, I don't have any outstanding amounts to display. So when I hit run report, it's basically going to show nothing on this report. But when I go ahead and I'll rerun this now for the past deposit, you can see how it's coming up here, and it's basically going to say nothing. There's no activity to the drawer. Let's go ahead and exit out of that. Let's go back to the past deposits tab and rerun this now. I'm just basically going to click on that and click run report. We'll print this to the screen. And by the way, Brandy, this is answering your question. What does the printout look like when you're using the drawer counting? Basically, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to show you ultimately what your amounts were that it came up with in the clearing. So in this case, the $15 of clearing, the $234.33 in check, the $531 in coupon clearing for a total deposit of $254.64. Additionally, you can rerun this for detail lines. So if we go ahead and check mark that, and I will put this one more time to the screen, we will see basically the individual details that make up those amounts. So in this case, there's the cash transaction of the 15, there's the check transaction of the $244.33, and there's the shared sale, the other $531 that we did for the coupon clearing using that same reference number. So again, hopefully that makes sense. Thank you so much, Brandy, for the question. Hopefully that answers your question. It basically is just going to show you what the activity to the drawer is as far as where those values are coming from. I should mention that this report can be printed to the little 3-inch receipt printer. So that's usually the printer that you have in most cases at these retail stations. So you can print basically the same detail to a 3-inch printer, and you'll get not all of this detail. You wouldn't be able to print this for detail to the receipt printer, but you can print the non-detail report so that you can have that printout to, if you're putting all these funds into a little deposit envelope, you can put the report of the balance to drawer in with that, so that your bookkeeper or whoever is kind of doing the checks and balances afterwards, they'll have that to go off of. So that's kind of the idea of the report. This is specifically the report that directly is impacted by the daily deposit program. Sometimes I'll get asked, what's the difference between the daily balance report and the daily activity report that we'll find in reports and miscellaneous and daily activity? Well, daily activity report is not looking at the ledger activity to these clearing accounts and simply showing activity to the drawer, but it's not reflecting the ledger. So if I do this as of today and go ahead and run this, this is the idea of this report is more of a summary report of something that you can use as like an end of day type report. You can see the breakdown of the different sales by category and non-inventory and sales tax collected, and a breakdown of the different payment methods. But this report, as you can see down at the bottom, it's going to mention these is really meant for stores that are not using the ledger portion of AIM. Really, basically, the idea of this is you could take these figures and then plug them into some third-party ledger program if you're using that, or if you're just doing the bookkeeping by hand, these are going to give you some summary values that you could use for that. But if you are using the bookkeeping, if you are using the ledger, and most importantly, you are using the daily deposit, then by all means, you would go into modules, daily posting, and daily deposit at the end of each day to record that deposit. Some other things I do want to mention. If we go to, let me see if I can remember where it is. I'm just going to use the drop-down menus because I believe this will be easier for me to find. You'll notice that there is, in the utilities menu of Ledger, there is a program called Update Ledger Deposit. Now, typically, you would only run this if support directs you to do so. But the idea of this deposit update program, you can see it's going to come up and say, this will mark your clearing accounts that are less than or equal to this date as deposited without making ledger entries. And you would choose the date down below. If you're familiar with accounting, basically every time something happens that has a tangible value, debits and credits are being posted. If we go ahead and take a look at today's, let's go into reports and into ledger, and we will go take a look at list ledger by reference. I'm just going to do this for today through today and print this to the screen. So what we're going to see is these activities. So here is the, well, that was the deposit that I did just prior to the session happening. Here's the sale that I did for 1007 and 1008. And of course, I posted this as of tomorrow, so they're not going to show up here. Let me rerun this report for, let me actually fix that, through to tomorrow as well. So that way we will see all of my activity, including my deposits. So here are the two sales. And of course, I still didn't do that right. Let me go ahead and why is that not showing up for tomorrow? Let's go ahead and just use the system date instead of the ledger date. And we will run this one more time. But the idea of this is basically when those are being deposited into the 109 accounts, you can see how, and it's still not showing up for me, so I'm just going to have to explain it. But basically, when that value is being deposited, it's being debited into the 109, the 1091, the 1097, basically all the different payment methods. You can see the same thing down here for the 1092. And I'll just use the one I did to clear these amounts before the webinar started. You can see how it's doing the opposite entry. It's doing a credit to clear out the cash clearing and so forth and move that into its respective deposit account. So basically, when it's all said and done, the clearing accounts go back to a net zero. If for whatever reason your ledger is off and you can't quite get it back to every time you try and get the ledger to zero, it comes up and wants to deposit that, because basically every time you do a journal entry to the 109 accounts, it wants to in turn deposit that. Basically, that's the idea of that update ledger deposit program. You would get your accounts back to zero. You would then run that utility again underneath ledger and utilities and update ledger deposit for up to that date. And that would then mark all those transactions as having been deposited. There's basically a special flag on those that marks them as deposited so they don't show up in your daily deposit program to be deposited. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, usually you're going to be directed to do that by a technical support representative if you're having problems with your daily deposit. But that kind of reflects what I wanted to talk about with daily deposit. So again, the main thing is it's primarily for bookkeeping, but it can be used to just basically keep track of the amounts in your drawer as a checks and balances function, especially for that check count, or excuse me, drawer counting function. So even if you're not using the bookkeeping, you may find it extremely handy. And you may have noticed that there were some time options in there as well for the cutoff and posting date. So if you are clearing your drawer multiple times, let's say you have a first shift, a second shift, a third shift, and you want that drawer to be cleared but not necessarily deposited, you can change it so it's not going to the 108 account by default. Maybe it's going to your 101-1 cash on hand, and then each time you do a daily deposit, it'll clear out those 109 accounts and reset it for the next person's shift. So that's a strategy that you could use with that. One other thing I should mention, in the maintenance of your ledger, so maintenance and ledger, there is an option in the maintenance area where you can do an override for the daily deposit. And the purpose of this override is change the bank ledger number location. So say, for example, if you do have two locations, location 1 deposits into checking account 1, and location 2, let's say, deposits into checking account 2. But you recall that in the system categories, there was only a place to put them in one time for your business as a whole. You could come in here and you could say that for the Dubuque location, the bank ledger, where it's going to clear to, or deposit to, is 1081, and the clear ledger would be 1091, and you would save that. And then let's say that for your Iowa City location, in my purposes, that's going to clear to, or bank deposit to 1082, the checking account number 2 for that same clearing account. So in this case, cash on hand, or not cash on hand, cash clearing. So basically, you'd build it out that way. And then ultimately, when you're doing your deposit for one location or the other, it'll deposit to the appropriate bank for that location. So that's another thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. If you haven't already signed up for it, please do so this coming Friday, 2 days from now. We'll be talking about bank reconciliation, where we'll be taking a look at how these deposits can then be reconciled as you get your monthly bank statements. So definitely check that out. We have webinars coming up next week that are going to be going into the tab functions of point of sale. If you have use of tracking, that will be discussing that, how it gets set up, how it works. We also are doing a webinar next week, if I remember correctly, on, yes, the inventory export-import routines as backed by popular demand and suggestion. If you have any suggested webinars that you would like me to do, let me know in the questions area. Shoot me an email, training@tritechretail.com. Be more than happy to do as many webinars as I can for you. In the meantime, let's check out some of the questions that are coming in here. So let's see. Charles is asking here, I have 3 stores and sometimes the need to check all past deposits for a given day. Is there any way to select more than one past deposit to print as a document to view? Yes, there is. In that same report, I believe I still have it open back here. I do not. In that same report that we were looking at before, so we'll go back into reports and general ledger and the daily balance report. That's the purpose of the third tab, the past deposits by date. So basically, when you run this for any date range, and I'll just do today through today because I have 2 deposits in there technically. When you run that, that will actually show you basically the values of all of those deposits for that time frame. So again, there's the 122.86 that I did basically as of today, and then the other one that I did as of, so to speak, tomorrow. So actually, if I go ahead and do that today through tomorrow, we'll go ahead and run that, and we'll print that to the screen. So this is basically how you can see multiple deposits simultaneously. So it's going to go ahead and tally all those up for you. And if you ran this for details, you'd see all the individual detail lines, like we said. So we can even do that just really quick here too. We'll do the show detail lines, print this one final time. So we'll see those dates and transactions that make up those values. So hopefully that helps there, Charles. Thank you so much for the question. Kathy says, how soon will this be available to view later? Do we go into the same place as other training sessions? Thank you so much, Kathy, for that question. Yes, actually, on our member portal, at the very top of the download page. In fact, let me show this to you if I can. Let me go ahead and open up a, I'm going to go ahead and grab a web page here to display. Pull up tritechretail.com here for my screen here. So on our website, let me get my face out of the way. Where are we at? Okay. Go away. On our website, if you go up to the member portal, in the member portal, you go to the download program updates section. And then, of course, you would log in. let me go ahead and log in. And at the top of the download screen, Charles, you would actually ask via email as well. Right here at the top, you can see it says for the latest V12 online webinars, go here. This is where all of my webinars that are saved are going to be available, including today's and all future webinars. They are separate from these videos down here. These videos down here are more in-house videos that are kind of purposed to a specific function, such as updating the program, running these different procedures and such. These are mostly produced by Brett over in support. Most of you have probably talked to Brett, excellent dude. For the videos that I've been doing, these webinars, you'll click up here where it says go here. This will actually take you to a separate area on the web where I've got a kind of a repository of all of these webinars. So they're going to be newest to oldest, top to bottom. So you can see here's the ones that I've been doing the past couple of sessions. If we load more, then these will be all of the webinars I've done on version 12 all the way back to over a year ago when I first started doing these. So definitely check these out. Kathy, thank you so much for the question there. And I think this is a great place to make sure that people know where they can find these. Of course, if you didn't see the webinar, then you won't be seeing where to get it. But I always like to make sure people know that you can get to it at the top of that download page. So hopefully that's been helpful. I see folks are kind of filtering out, so I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here. If you come up with a question afterwards that I did not get a chance to answer here for you live, definitely shoot that over to me at training@tritechretail.com. You can also give our support folks a call if you need to have a question answered a little bit quicker on the fly, as it were. They're all familiar with these functions in technical support. So thank you so much for your patronage. Thank you for your continued support. We are here to serve you. And don't ever forget that. We want to see you succeed, and hopefully our software can help you do it. Thanks so much. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you on Friday.